Well, John Bolton continues to swirl at the center of a lot of this controversy. And today, his attorney said this: there is plenty that his client knows about meetings and conversations so far discussed in testimony, and others that have not yet been discussed in the testimony. And that was a bit tantalizing for everybody. But Democrats say that they are not going to go to court to get John Bolton to come testify. They say, you know what? This just proves that there's obstruction coming from this administration, and that only adds to their argument for impeachment. But could they be concerned that maybe the high-profile Bolton, who worked very closely with the president, might not, in the end, give them exactly what they want to hear from him? Joining me now, Byron, Washington Examiner, chief political correspondent, and a Fox News contributor. Byron, good evening. Great to have you here tonight.
Good evening, Martha.
Just your thoughts on that, because I thought it was very interesting. They said, well, he doesn't want to come, and we don't want to get into a big, long legal harangue over this with him and also his deputy, Mr. Cooperman. So we're just going to let it lie. Does that seem unusual to you at all?
Doesn't sound right to me. I will say, if anything is covered by executive privilege, it would be the president's private conversations with his national security advisor about issues of foreign policy and national security. Yep. This is confidential advice the president is receiving from a top aide in an area in which the Constitution gives the president a lot of powers. So there's a very good argument that the Bolton-Trump conversations are, in fact, privileged. On the other hand, no court has decided that. Democrats clearly disagree with that, and they wanted to get Charles Cooperman, who is Bolton's deputy, to come testify. Cooperman didn't want to testify, asked a judge to settle the matter. And the Democrats then withdrew the subpoena. And that's what that's hard to figure out. The Democrats said, well, it's just going to take a long time. There'll be an extended legal fight. We just don't want to do it. They might be afraid they're going to lose. On the other hand, when you look at this whole impeachment fight, all the witnesses we've seen, nobody has firsthand knowledge of the president. None of these witnesses were talking with the president, and the president said, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that.
In fact, if I could just interject, the one person who did have a conversation with him was Ambassador Sondland on the phone. And he said to Ambassador Sondland, just tell Zelensky, there's no quid pro quo, just tell Zelensky to do what he was elected to do. Because Zelensky ran on this platform that he was going to come in and, clean up all the corruption. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's exactly right. But the other witnesses, there were people listening on the call. There were people in the State Department. They know about things from their peripheral positions, but they don't really get you inside the White House. And John Bolton would do that. And John Bolton is not saying, I will never, ever, ever testify. He's saying, I want a judge to resolve this matter before I testify. And that quote from his lawyer that you just read, I mean, that's quite a tease. I need a judge to decide, but if I testify, boy, I know a lot of stuff you don't even know yet.
Yeah. I mean, so everybody's trying to get inside of that, right? And try to figure out, where is John Bolton really on this whole thing? And when you read into, some of what he's putting out there is a lot of, fundraising for Republican candidates. I mean, it's not like this is someone, he's obviously a very strong conservative. I mean, and he's a person who's very independent-minded and speaks his mind. He clearly was upset that Rudy Giuliani was at the center of all this. He didn't want that. He wanted the money to flow to the Ukraine. But the bottom line is, would John Bolton sit there at the table on the Hill, and when asked the question, do you think the president broke any law, or do you think that the president, meant that he was going to hold up this money? Nobody knows how he's going to answer that question. And that could be a huge moment for either side, right?
No, they don't. And we have had from a lot of witnesses, we've gotten their opinion about these events, of which they have some knowledge. And Bolton could just say, your question to Bolton would be, what did the president say? And then what did you say? And then what did the president say? I mean, it would be a very sort of fact-based conversation. Another reason for the Democratic hurry on this, because as you mentioned, the Democrats are now saying, well, we're not going to pursue this in court, but if the president doesn't allow these people to testify, that could be another article of impeachment, of an example of the White House obstructing Congress. There's another problem here, which is the Democrats are racing the clock with their 2020 presidential race. The Iowa caucuses are on February 3rd. You don't have to do a lot of calendar math to think that you might possibly have a Senate trial somewhere around that time. 6 candidates in the Democratic race right now are members of the Senate who, if there were a trial, they'd be basically chained to their desk in Washington for maybe a month for a Senate trial. I mean, these are the perils of conducting an impeachment amid a presidential race.
Not to mention the fact that right now it seems like everybody knows how this is already going to turn out because it's such a partisan experience, right? You know that the House is going to vote to impeach, at least it looks that way. And by all indications, at least at this point in the game, the Senate will not. You know, they have stood in lockstep, the GOP Senate. So it also could be that that Democrats want to get this behind them at this point so that they can put a little bit of space between it if it turns out to be something that is not politically advantageous for them. And at least at this point, it looks like, you know, it's a toss-up. It leans towards people not wanting to impeach the president in the battleground states.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like they can avoid this. I mean, there comes a time in any endeavor where you cannot just say, never mind. And I think Democrats are far past that point right now.
No,
they're going to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that leads you to a Senate trial, and that takes you into next year.
Yeah. Byron York, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha.
Have a good night.